All right, we're going to make the masks. This is what they look like when they're finished. There's 2 layers. This particular mask has a cotton woven outside layer and a white flannel inner layer. I'm sure you could do more than 2 layers. This is the pattern in the PDF file. The size medium is the one with all the pattern markings. After you print it out, measure this line here. If it measures 7 inches, then it printed correctly. If it doesn't measure 7 inches, I really don't know how to help you. After you've printed it out, I recommend printing it on a piece of cardstock like this. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But after printing it out, you can trace it and then cut that out. That's the easiest way to trace the pattern, I found. You may find an easier way to do it for yourself, but that's how I did it. So these are the materials you're going to need. You're going to need some elastic. I have this giant old spool of elastic that I've been using. I don't know how wide. You can use even elastic cord. This is on the wide side, but it's what I had and it's what I've been giving people when I make them for friends, because that's what I have available. But elastic cord would work too. You're going to need some fabric. This is what I've been using for the inner layer. It's flannel, and for this demonstration I'll use this for the outer layer. This is also flannel. I've made a bunch in 2 layers of flannel, and you know, they're pretty thick. You have to work to breathe inside the thing if it fits nicely. Also, you're going to need fabric scissors. These are regular scissors for cutting the paper. I get very angry when people use these for paper. You're going to need, you could use this to mark it with, and a fabric pen, or I just use a pencil to mark the fabric with, but if you have a fabric pen that disappears with a little water or heat, that works too. So we're going to make a medium-sized mask. So you want to fold, because you're going to need, you need 4 of these, this shape. So you're going to fold that in half. This is the selvage. It doesn't matter if that ends up in it. I mean, this isn't a beauty contest. You're not going to be wearing this on the runway. So you want that in there like that. And then what I'm going to do is use a pencil and just trace. And you got to really hold it down. And then trace around the edges. I've used markers. I'm afraid that if someone washes it though, that the marker will bleed a bit. I guess a Sharpie won't, but anything water-based will bleed. And the pencil just ends up in the seam allowance anyway, so it doesn't really matter if it doesn't come off here. Okay. Oh, wait, I need this back part here. All right. So I have that traced. Now we want 4 of these. So I'm going to take this fabric and fold it in half as well. Okay. So I'm just putting that on top of there. Now when you fold this in half, for anything with a print on it, you really do want to fold it and cut it, because you need mirror images of the pattern. So when you are making this, you're going to make mirror images of this. Now it doesn't matter on this fabric because there's really no right or wrong side, but on a printed fabric there's a right and a wrong side, and you kind of want mirror images because the whole pattern goes together like that. If you just cut this like this here and then another one over on another spot, then what you're going to get is 2 identical images like this, and you're going to have that part on the outside. If you want this on the outside, you got to do it like I tell you to. So then you just want to cut these out, and I'm going to make this easier for myself, I'm going to trim that off. And I'm going to trim here as well. Okay, so here we have, this is our inner lining, and there's 2 of these. And this is our outer lining. Again, there's 2 of these, and see how they're mirror images of each other? Now what we need to do is sit down at, either you're going to use needle and thread if you don't have a sewing machine, or on the sewing machine, and we're going to do a straight stitch down this part of each of these. Okay, so first we're stitching this and then assembling it. All right, so we're just using white thread, white bobbin, straight stitch, medium stitch length. I don't have a giant seam allowance on this because that's just kind of how I work. But if you need more seam allowance, then just cut your pattern slightly bigger. But we are going to first sew down this part. It's already starting to look like a mask. It's pretty simple. So that's the outside. And this one is the inside. And I pulled it apart before, so I have to put it back together. This one, now you don't have to do this, but I sew it in ever so slightly more than this one, because this ends up on the inside of that. And if you understand how that works, this ends up taking more space than this, because it's like this is the inner circle, that's the outer circle. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but you don't have to do it. It'll be a little bunchier if you don't, but I don't think most people will notice. It's not comfortable to wear a mask anyway. Now, what you're going to want to do is we're going to leave this one like this, and then this guy gets turned the other direction. Okay? So he's like that now, or she. Then you take this and you put it inside this one. Okay? And kind of meet up the seams. Alright, so I got these together. I have in here, this is just a little scrap piece of fabric that I wet. It helps if you get your fingers wet, and it helps you to move the fabric around a bit. And if you're making these for people, you don't want to be licking your fingers. Okay, so put that over here. Now what we want to do is sew the outside edges. Okay, this, you're going to sew the top of the mask and then the bottom of the mask, and you'll see what these little thingies are for in a minute. All right. Let's put my glasses on. If you need to pin it together, you can do that. This is flannel, so it kind of has some friction of its own. So I haven't really needed to pin too much doing this. As I approach here, these two seams, I put one in one direction and one in the other. So you don't need to flatten them out like this. You know, you're not making a prom gown. So one's in one direction, one's in the other direction. Okay. Now on this side, you kind of want to sew here, but it's hard to, it's so small, it's hard to go in that direction. So I start at this part right here. When you get to this corner, you're going to want to stop and pivot this way. I don't even back to lock the stitch, I just go kind of right to the end. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to this side, flip it over and go in the other direction to sew that down. Now, this little part here is because this ends up getting folded in, you know, when you fold it in, and the elastic is going to go here. If this were straight, it would end up folding in like that, and your elastic might end up in a lot farther. So this way the elastic will come as far to the edge as possible. All right, so on the pattern that I drew, you see these little notches here, and then this right here. Because of how geometry works, what we need to do is cut some notches out. You can either cut notches out or trim really close to the edge, okay? If you're cutting notches out, you need I'd say like 5 of them. And it's to make less fabric in that seam when it gets turned to the inside. Otherwise it's going to be all bunchy. And you need to do that to both sides, this side and this side. Alternatively, if you trust that the fabric is not going to fray or something, you can also just cut closely, but not too close, and you have to be careful. You want to cut closely to the seam, so there's like that much left. If you were making like a pair of pants, I wouldn't do that because there's going to be stress on the fabric, but there shouldn't really be any stress on the fabric when it's sitting on your face. Okay, again, cut closely to the seam. And then here, because this is an outside edge and this is an inside, so it's the inside of the curve, this was the outside of the curve. You do notches on the outside of the curve. On one of these, what you want to do is just put a couple of clips into it, so that when it is turned this direction, which is longer, it can spread out a little bit, okay? So that's not pulling right there. You know, technically, you should probably do it at the top too, the notches and stuff, but I don't have a lot of seam allowance up there, so I think we're good. All right. And this down here, it looks curved, but it really is straight, okay? All right, so now we need to turn it around. Oh, you know what else? We got a clip here too, into that little corner right there, just like that, so that it moves easier. If you want, you can like cut the tip of that off. You don't really need it, and you can cut close to the seam if you want. Okay, now we turn it. And now we want to tuck these edges in. Okay, you see how that tucks right in there. Okay. You can pin that if you need to. Now we're going to get the elastic. Okay, so you need 2 pieces of elastic, and you can measure them here. And they're about 7 inches long for an adult. And then you want to sew them in here. So I just kind of feel for where it is. This is a case where I do tend to use a pin. If you're sewing cord, if you're using elastic cord instead of just a piece of elastic like this, you may want to like tie like a knot in the end or a loop or something for when you sew over it so that the threads actually catch it, because the chances of the threads in the machine catching that actual little piece of cord, it's like probably not going to happen. And even if it does catch it, it probably won't hold it well enough because it'll be like one stitch in the thing, right? So put it in there. You want them like that. So these go around your ear. Then you kind of just top stitch it. This pin on this side. My machine has a little bit of trouble going over the elastic. Lifting it to help. And I like to go over the elastic twice. I don't know if that's overkill, but that's what I've been doing. Okay. There we go. Ordinarily, I then just continue around the other side. There's the elastic put in, okay? I'm going to go around top stitching and then sew this elastic in while top stitching. A little trick, get the seams flat is, again, wet your fingers and kind of roll this back and forth so that it's nice into the edge. And if you need to pin, I'm not going to pin. But I am going to try and get this flatter on this side. Ow, ouchie. I just stabbed myself. Okay, now I'm going to top stitch around. And I try to match up where the threads ended before. And that's it. You're done. This is, you can tell when you lay it, when you fold it in half, this part is the top of the mask, that goes over your nose, and that's the bottom. Okay? It's best if, when you're making it, when you get this part of it done, pin on the elastic, and be careful with the pins, but try it on your own face or the face of the person you're making it for to see if this is long enough, because everybody's ears are in different spots on their head, obviously. But that's it. If you have any questions, you can text me or email me or hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Thank you.